2 o'clock time. And yes, it's being recorded. Now you can all click on that. We encourage you to be active in the chat. It's not going to be distracting to the speaker and facilitator. So just go ahead and do so. It is 3 minutes past. I could start by saying that EPIC-We is a Horizon Europe-funded project aiming to empower young people to participate in shaping European culture and their own future by imagining, creating, and exchanging cultural values and heritage through game making. It focuses on exploring and developing new models for cultural collaboration, empowered participation, cultural processes, and design kits for games through and for culture, which can help establish cultural hubs across Europe. I hope all of you have joined through our community Games for Culture in My Creative Networks. This is also where you can see all our events. You can find past presentations. You can comment, debate. If you wake up in the middle of the night and can't sleep and have some thoughts, you can go to the app. Actually, there's an app where you can go and comment on whatever you heard today or you heard the last 2 Mondays when we had these sessions. I believe it's now, I should be ad-libbing for 1 minute more, but why don't we just start? First speaker up is Dimitri Schuurman. He holds the position, what does it say here, of University Business Development Manager at the research group imec-MICT at Ghent University, where Dimitri is responsible for research on inclusive design, impact via living labs, and design for futures, all in the context of new and emerging technologies. Dimitri is also a visiting professor in strategic design and innovation management at Ghent University in the industrial design studies, and he partly works as a senior research strategist for the European Network of Living Labs. You can read more about Dimitri by going to My Creative Networks, to the group. Here you can also register for other events, and you can also see some research papers there. But now, Dimitri, the Zoom is all yours.
Thanks a lot for introducing. And as a matter of fact, I'm now doing the call of the headquarters from the European Network of Living Labs. So really inside, let's say, the epicenter of all Living Lab activity. And within this presentation, I want to introduce you the concept of Living Labs, because it has been and is being used quite a lot, but sometimes with some misunderstanding, so that you get a grip of what it's all about, and to find potential ways in which you could use this concept, or in which you could collaborate with active Living Lab organizations, or maybe start one up by yourself. So the title is Open and User Innovation in Living Labs. So an introduction and a bit of added value. So indeed, I have a couple of roles that I'm trying to combine. And as well, so working for imec. imec is a big research organization, and there I work for a research group who's doing a lot of research on design, and how design also can play a role in innovation. So imec is pretty much top-down technology innovation. So we try to complement that with more bottom-up approaches, and where design also is being used to find use cases for this technology that will change a lot of the things that we do right now. For example, AI is also one of the big topics that we are working on, but we are working on things in the future, but we also try to involve the perspective of society and of the end users. So I'm mostly situated in the Krook, which is the public library in Ghent. I'm now at the annual office in Brussels, and I teach my classes in the University of Ghent, which also has a department in Kortrijk. A little bit about my roles, about my work at imec-MICT-Ghent University. So it's called the Societal Imagineering Lab, and our research focus on these three areas. So if at some point you find any connection with these, or you're also looking to submit joint project proposals, you can also always contact me. So first of all, inclusive design. This is about how you can collaborate and how you can design with also vulnerable populations, because design, I think, is a very strong methodology, and it's very strong in also communicate as a communication means between different groups and populations. Also, we do research on human augmentation and assistive technologies, and we try to develop toolkits for user innovation. How can we get these users also active in innovation processes? So the second part, design for societal impact. So this is about designing of interventions for societal, for especially complex societal challenges or wicked problems, as we call them. Participatory impact assessment, also something very important. A lot of impact assessment to this day is very top-down driven. We also do some research on bottom-up, so that you, together with your stakeholders, try to identify the different elements which are important and along the project do this impact assessment together. And also living labs for emerging technologies is also still one of our research topics. This is what my talk will be about today. And also design for futures. More and more, it is important that we do not only do innovation for today's problem, but we also have to anticipate the future. So scenario analysis, participatory future projects, research and technology road mapping are also stuff that we take into account more and more in the projects, and also that I link to living lab activities. So first of all, what is a living lab? These are the main living lab characteristics. And in a way, this is a page for a new booklet that I wrote together with European Network of Living Labs. I was hoping to have it finished by today, but we are still in the final review version. So it will come online, I think, in the coming weeks. I hope for the end of the year and maybe early next year, but we will be sure to share the link. But within this booklet, we really give an overview on what living labs are, what is the status, and these are the general characteristics of living labs. So it's all about active user involvement. So within a living lab, the end user, and I would even say the stakeholders of a certain problem domain that you're working on, they're giving active roles. So it's about two-way communication between the innovator and between the end users and the stakeholders. This also links up very much with co-creation. So you work in co-creation. You do not design for users, but you design with users, or even design by users if you have these toolkits for user innovation. So co-creation is, I would say, the main way of working within a living lab. Multi-method, by definition, within a living lab project, you are using and combining multiple methods together, in which also these kind of creative methods, and also as you are working also on games, on cultural exchanges, these kind of methods and tools can be very relevant in living lab projects and in living lab organizations. Also, per definition, a living lab is multi-stakeholder. You collaborate with multiple stakeholders, and as much as possible, you try to involve the quadruple helix, as we call it. So it's about having public sector, private sector, research organizations, and civil society or end users as being part of living lab projects and living lab organizations. Orchestration is very important. Living labs tend to orchestrate the different methods, the different tools, and also the collaboration between these stakeholders. And last but not least, we call living labs because we innovate in real life settings. So in a way, we try to involve the real life setting also as an important factor within the innovation process. So we try to co-create, we try to test and evaluate, and even co-design as much as possible in the real life setting. In urban living labs, we work in cities. In rural living labs, we work abroad. So it depends all in what topic you are working. We try to get the real life setting really as a part of the innovation process. And the whole concept has been influenced and shaped by over 50 years of policy and research practice. I also added some papers in the reading materials if you want to know more about this. But I will go and brief you a little bit with the highlights. So where did this concept come from? More than 50 years it has been around. It started more or less in the year 2000 at the MIT, with Prof. William Mitchell was one of the main figures. We call them American Living Labs, where they really designed apartments that they built purposefully to do research in. So these apartments were built so test users could come and live for a long, prolonged period of time. And new technologies were tested and implemented in these labs that were made to resemble real life. So it was really a lab to live in. This was taken then in Europe, also based on some European evolutions that were going on. But in Europe, the lab went outside. So the idea was then to have real life pilots with emerging new technologies. And at first, this was the first living lab in Belgium. It was called iCity. Already in 2004, it was done to do testing with mobile technologies. Remember, 2004, there was no iPhone yet. There was no mobile internet yet. These things were all still very much in its infancy stages. So these were, let's say, large-scale testbeds to see what these new and promising technologies could do. And this image was in fact taken in 2006. So before the iPhone, before any app had seen the daylight, this was developed within a living lab. So this was a mobile computer where a very preliminary version of an app ecosystem was being tested in 2 cities. But in 2008, this initiative went into liquidation. It was a public-private collaboration, and this then resulted in iMinds, then at the moment, and imec taking up this living lab activities. In the following years, from 2010 to 2014, we had more large-scale trials, again with emerging technologies like fiber to the home. And there we really discovered the power of these users, that end users really could have a say in the appropriation of these new technologies, also of the use cases of these new technologies. And there we also developed and worked more on a living lab methodology. We called it Living Labs as a Service, that we started to offering these living lab approaches towards startups and SMEs. But at this time, because there was also quite some unclarity in terms of what the terminology really meant, what a living lab really was, I also, based on this experience on living labs, started writing a PhD, because at that point, there were a lot of single project living labs within Europe or within cities, where in one shot, a city or a European consortium would do user involvement, would set up maybe a test bed, would do co-creation in real life. But then at the end, this project stopped and was put on hold, or simply they started with the next project. So then I thought it was time to really get some conceptual clarity about, because there was way more living lab practice as there was living labs theory. So this PhD, I did that in 2015 to try to shed some more light. And in a way, this is still a bit of a problem, because if you look into do Google Scholar, the number of times that living labs are mentioned within a paper, so you see really a steep increase with more than 5,000 mentions of living labs within academic papers in 2022, 2023. But when we look with where living labs are really fully the topic within a paper, we see only a small increase of papers. So there's a big discrepancy between people using the term living labs, even in academic practice, but as much more also really in practice, as with full research being done on living labs. And also that's why we still need this kind of research to really show what exactly is a living lab and how you should optimally implement it to reap the benefits. So basically, this was the outcome of my PhD. This is also on a daily basis still being used by the European Network of Living Labs, which is an organization that certifies living labs all around the globe. I will briefly come back to that in my conclusion at the end of my presentation. But basically, they do look whether the living lab organization, what does the organization look like? And this organization, a living lab, is an organization that works for a longer period of time and then does multiple projects. And their multi-actor orchestration is very important to orchestrate the different actors with a different vision that you want to achieve with your living lab, and to set up multiple projects. Within these living lab projects, the second layer Living Lab activities. It's all about having multiple methods and active user involvement to co-create innovations that link up with your Living Lab strategy. And on the bottom layer, we have Living Lab user and stakeholder activities. One Living Lab project is about multiple activities, multiple touch points with stakeholders and end users. We do real-life testing, you do real-life co-creation. So there you have toolbox or tool sets where you set up the different activities within real life and in a co-creative fashion to come up to innovation. So I will briefly now show you some examples of these three layers so that you really get a full view of what Living Labs are all about. And I will end up with a short how NL is playing a role in this and how maybe you can also start doing stuff linked to Living Labs. In terms of also the main theoretical basis, so the organizational and the project layer, it's mainly about open innovation, about collaboration with different stakeholders to do innovation and to advance innovation processes. And within your project, and especially within the user and stakeholder activities, we rely much on user innovation. The user is given an active role within innovation rather than simply using it as a bystander in innovation projects. And also in terms of outcomes of Living Lab projects, we can for sure connect Living Labs outcomes to responsible innovation because they're co-creative nature, because they involve multiple stakeholders. I think Living Labs really have the power to really come to this responsible innovation outcomes, which is very needed in our contemporary complex world with a lot of wicked challenges and wicked problems. So within what is now the added value of a Living Lab organization, it's really about also orchestrating and balancing the inputs and the added values for multiple actors. One of the examples that I can use here from our own practice was City of People. City of People was a collaboration between the City of Ghent, between Ghent University and between imec, and was set up to tackle wicked problems within the City of Ghent, and where the university and imec came up with technology and also with user involvement and with research to come up with solutions for these wicked problems in a city environment. And in the first year that we did this project, we worked on healthcare and how we could improve the quality of life for certain citizens. And by actively involving all the stakeholders from these different actors, we really scoped the problems statement to how can we also do or solve the problem of loneliness within people with an elderly age. And this was an example, a very concrete place where this need was found. These were apartment buildings in Ghent that even didn't have elevators and where a lot of elderly people were living with almost no visits and with really a big issue of getting out and meeting other people. So how could we solve this problem for these people together with other stakeholders in the city of Ghent? So this is an image of one of these users that we use. So we really went to these apartments, we really involved them to find out about the needs, and then we started co-creating some of the solutions. So this is already in a later stage when we were already testing a prototype of technology that we developed. It was some kind of a smart speaker that would talk to these elderly people when they felt lonely and where they could react by pushing the buttons. But we also involved the local healthcare professionals from the city of Ghent and students, because students were also an important volunteer students that were willing to also pay these elderly people a visit. But to facilitate this matchmaking between the students, between the elderly people, and to have the local healthcare people also have an overview, we needed some kind of technology to connect these three groups. So that's why in the senior home, we added some sensors to detect physical loneliness, but also with the voice interface. And when these sensors connected, there can be a problem of loneliness. It would ask, do you want to be visited by someone? And then when the answer was yes, this was connected to an interface, a chatbot that went via WhatsApp to the volunteer students and the local healthcare professionals. They had a dashboard in which they could follow up on these interactions. So we took existing initiatives and we improved upon that by clearly and doing a lot of research into the problem statement, and then coupling the capabilities from Ghent University and from imec in terms of technology, and to come up with this new solution. So this was very successful. We won quite some prizes at this moment with this Living Lab project. But once we went to scale, we found one issue, because we hadn't involved from the preliminary stages the business or the private sector, and they had a little bit the not invented here syndrome. So we had a very successful project, a successful outcome, a successful technology, but we were a little bit stuck in the scaling phase because we didn't include the private stakeholders from the start. So this also made us think, how can we change the way of working and how can we adapt it so that we really can go full cycle, that we can really go from exploration towards actual implementation of these solutions. And this is now the answer, is now the Common Living Lab is now already active for 5 years, and where we have set up and, let's say, improved the way in which we set up these Living Lab projects, in which we set up collaboration between the City of Ghent, between imec, and between Ghent University, to come up with solutions for actual and practical urban problems that we identify. So, and now I will try the video. We tested it so that you can see what Common is all about.
Gent is een stad met torenhoge ambities. Want het kan altijd beter, vind je niet? Sinds 1817 kun je hier komen denken en durven. En hier, in de krochten van de krook, ligt een bijzondere plek verborgen. Kom maar. Het is hier te doen, hè? Hier werken ondernemers, experten, onderzoekers en bricoleurs allemaal samen aan stadswijzigingen. Allee, aan veranderingen die onze stad nog wijzer maken.
Innovatief zijn zit in ons Gents DNA. Diep te horen sleutelen we aan een betere stad. En onze inwoners spelen daar altijd een belangrijke rol bij.
Om een slimme stad te zijn, hebben we wijze mensen gelijk jij nodig. Ja, jij. Zie jij de lamp al branden als anderen nog in het donker zitten? Of zij iemand die het altijd goed kan uitleggen?
Ik ben zelf hartpatiënt en ik vind het deel van mijn verhaal belangrijk om anderen te kunnen helpen om zich minder alleen en geïsoleerd te voelen.
Common is een open laboratorium voor mensen met en zonder diploma. Met veel of weinig tijd, want in iedereen zit een uitvinder.
We babbelen met de mensen om te weten waar zij van wakker liggen. En met die uitdagingen gaan we aan de slag om oplossingen te bedenken.
Eerst willen we uitvissen wat er in Gent beter kan. Allee, waar krijg jij of uw buurvrouw grijs haar van? Dat kan de uitdaging zijn waarop wij ons gaan smijten. Niet neuten en niet pleuien. Tijd om de koppen samen te steken. Wij brainstormen onze weg naar maakbare oplossingen. Dingen die echt marcheren, moeten een meerwaarde creëren. Dus als we het kunnen maken, durven we onszelf ook afvragen, willen wij dat wel?
En we zijn dus met ons idee aan een mini-proeftuin begonnen, waar dat we van dat idee tot een concreet prototype gekomen zijn. En dat prototype hebben we dus vandaag kunnen testen bij een breed publiek om te zien wat dat aanslaat.
En zo doen we dat bij Common. Hier kunt u wij kwijt, iets bijleren, toffe mensen leren kennen, nieuwe technologieën in elkaar knutselen en zo de stad nog wijzer maken. Want de stad van morgen kunt jij mee komen maken. Bij Common.
So this really shows how we work and practice in this Living Lab organization. So how do we then do it? How did we change? And I think this is the main framework that we use, the sustainability triad. So we need to work on desirability. What do stakeholders really want? What are their needs? But also on feasibility. What can we do? What is available in terms of technology and of assets? But also, should we do this viability? Is there a sound business case or a sound business model to be found? So we always work on the interaction of these 3 elements. And this translates more or less into this innovation management process, where we first work in the fuzzy front space, in the fuzzy front end on the problems of end users. In the problem solution fit space, we try to come up with solutions. And in the product market fit phase, the adoption diffusion space, we look really how can we find a sound business model or a business case for this, and then we go to a scaling or implementation stage. Also, in terms of timing, we spend a lot, and also this is general in Living Labs, we spend a lot on the problem definition. Only if you really understand the problem well, you are able to co-design solutions in a better way. If you design what are really the problems, what is the box that you're working on, then you can start thinking outside the box. Say Einstein put it like that he would spend 59 minutes on defining the problem, only 1 minute in resolving. This is maybe a bit an exaggeration, but really defining the problem is very, very important to do so. So concretely, how did we change our approach in terms of the City of People example? We spent a lot of time by having different profiles together. So we worked also in a very creative and in a fun way. So we really used boat rides along the Krook. And this is also where we have our offices, to really have people in an open mindset and co-create and talk about the problems. Because in this year, the problems were about healthcare and how we can communicate with others, with different stakeholders on healthcare. Because in a lot of times communication and the wordings, the language is seen as too difficult. So how can we improve upon that? Then we form together multidisciplinary teams to work on concrete challenges and to then try to define different solutions. And we have developed our own Living Lab scoping sprint, which is an adaptation of the design sprint of Google, with more focus also on user involvement, to really, in a very short period of time, and 5 days, come up with concrete and testable prototypes, which we then later on try to scale up. One of the examples was this watch, and a couple of these challenges resulted in concrete startups and concrete things that are now trying to find a way to market. And this was, for example, a watch that was used by people who are suffering with a lot of pain, to identify how big is your pain. And because they then lack, they cannot use a simple smartphone, sometimes they're shaking. They co-designed a watch where you can turn a wheel to really indicate, have measures of how much you pain. This is called Dolo. So this is one of the examples how we are now scaling up actual projects based on concrete challenges that we got. And we use also a startup, the startup ecosystem within Ghent, to find the way from concrete problem definition towards teams, multidisciplinary teams, that then form up spin-offs or startups in the longer run. And what do we use? Indeed, we have then a toolbox of Living Lab methods and tools for this real-life intervention and co-creation. I also put in this here because we collected all the methods and tools and we put it in a nice card set that you can also consult online, with all kinds of user innovation tools and methods that we use in our Living Lab projects. And also over the years, to show that it really adds value, we did more than 86 projects with startups and SMEs, where we also took them through this funnel of methods and tools. And this resulted in the end of a launch percentage of 60% that startups were really able to launch their projects based on Living Lab project. And it really helps to make faster decisions in your innovation process and to make the right decisions. Also sometimes to abort, because 1 out of 4 did stop their project because there was an issue with desirability or with feasibility, but it really helps you to find an answer to the questions way sooner, because you involve all these users and stakeholders. And also we did a study on economic impact that also showed, it was really the first study that was done that really showed that you also can have an economic impact when you do Living Lab activities the right way. So to wrap up, Living Lab organizations also receive a lot of European support. So the European network of Living Labs was really, I would say, the big bang of this Living Lab concept. On the website, you can search for all kinds of Living Labs. There are Living Labs that also really specifically focus on culture and creativity. In total, for now, there are now 153 active members. 2021, now 173 active members in 2024. They're spread all over the globe, and they're also, each year we have a new cycle of Living Labs trying to get certified and entering the network. So if you are also in a situation that you connect to a lot of the things that I have been saying, or you are also maybe interested to become part of the network, I would say get in touch, and maybe you can also become one of these certified Living Labs that are online. And also, Martina told me to also pitch this. There's a call for artists that can join the annual Living Labs roster, because as you saw, we also are looking very much into creative methods and tools to engage with users and with stakeholders. And that's why science and arts can be very powerful sides of the same coin. And that's why NL explicitly is doing now a call for artists to also join the network and to also build collaboration. So if you feel that you might be, or you know some artists that might be interesting in this, please, I would say, have a look at the website, nl.org. And you can also, the call for applications is until December 15, 2024. So that was an overview of on what Living Labs is all about, on the different elements. So if there's any questions, I think we take them at the end, but I will be sure to also share the slides.
I just have a clarifying question here at the end, Dimitri. Thank you for your presentation. Excellent. It says a call for artists, but in reality, isn't it a call for creatives / artists? Game developers, designers, ceramists, craftsmen.
I think it is broader, but I also need to check the call myself. So it was only very last minute that Martina said, "Hey," because I was talking, I have to give a keynote now for this network, and she said, "Hey, this is very interesting. Put it in your slides." So I would say check it out. I think it can be broader as well, and so I'm not sure about all the modalities.
It looked like that when I looked at the text, just scanning the text while you were speaking. It seemed like it was a bit broader, because I think that's it's a really interesting perspective that you can also have these individual members that can contribute to the discussion. So,
yeah, but I think indeed it can be broader. So, but I would say check it out if you think you can also.
And thank you for hanging out. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for hanging out. We will have a Q&A at the end after the next speaker. So thank you. And we have shared twice your LinkedIn profile in the chat, so there's no excuse not to connect with Dimitri Schuurman. Thank you. And now we are going to an oldie but goodie, I would say. We know Kim very well, because Kim Halfloor is a postdoc at the Danish School of Education, Aarhus University, and also very much involved in the EPIC-We initiative. You're an assistant professor at University College Copenhagen, and you hold a PhD in playful higher education, and you are researching playful and relational methodologies and pedagogy, I can't say that, speculative futures in higher education and collaborative practices across disciplines and sectors. Now, help me, Kim, to pronounce it correctly, and then the Zoom is yours.
Thank you. I think it was quite well said, actually. So I'm just gonna share my screen, and you're hopefully all able to see it. There's a lot of like Zoom interface going on. So I can see Rasmus in my screen. Is it visible? All good. Okay. So thank you, Rasmus, for the introduction, and I will talk a bit about cultural hubs in EPIC-We, which is a form of living labs or cultural living labs, which is being developed and also tested. At the moment, we are about halfway through the project, and have some insights and some feeling about what a cultural living lab might entail. But of course, it's also still being developed. Then we'll also be talking a bit about cultural hubs in EPIC-We as a sort of transversal enactment of living labs. But I'll get back to that. So this talk, yes, it's about cultural hubs. It's about how the cultural hub is built upon a collaboration between higher education institutions, with also creative industries and with cultural heritage institutions and with youth citizens in this double helix system or innovation ecosystem. And with these four actors, this becomes like a cultural living lab, which differs a bit from the general model of double helix and living labs, perhaps, but is tailored towards cultural needs and tailored towards cultural innovation. So when I was thinking about how to do this talk, I was thinking quite a lot about that I recently read some like a book with my children called like Sword and Sorcery, and I think it's Sværen Trolddom in Danish, which is like a choose your own adventure book. And also remember that when I was a kid, like 30 years ago, in Denmark, before like streaming and all those things, we had each weekend, and I can't remember if it was Friday or Saturday, like on national TV, a vote about which movie we were seeing this weekend. And then after like 30 minutes of voting, there was a movie that was displayed across national TV, and everyone was like seeing the same thing. So I'm hoping that this talk can like share some of those like choose your own adventure themes. And in just a minute, I'm hoping that that all are awake and present to vote on the direction and emphasis on this talk. But just briefly before that, I would just like to mention a bit about my role in EPIC-We, and also perhaps why it's me at the moment giving this talk. So I think first of all, I'm a so-called hub leader at the Aarhus Cultural Hub, which I think generally means that I'm a coordinator of things across partners and across actors in this Helix Cultural Living Lab. But I'm also a work package leader and task leader in the project, and have also been part of co-writing the theoretical and the practical foundations of cultural living labs, and the concept and the theories and how it might be enacted, which is to be revised and iterated in January 2025. So fairly soon we'll have an updated protocol on what cultural hubs actually means and what it looks like and what it feels like. But yes, and I should also say that because of I'm a hub lead and a part of the EPIC-We and everyday life, I'm of course talking a lot about how EPIC-We and the project envisions or sees cultural hubs. But I'm also talking, I think, a bit for myself and like practical and personal and collective experience of working and being part of this cultural hub, and how I, at the moment, like think of it and try to conceptualize it in a slightly new but still similar veins to the project emphasis. So this is like the tentative agenda. There's like 9 categories or themes, you might say. And under each theme, there's a slide. And I'm hoping that we, in just a few seconds, can vote on which direction this talk should take. But just before that, I'll just say something about each of the themes. So the first one, what is transversal and experiential corporate collaborations? Draws upon current theories of collaborative practices, both from like post-humanism and ethnography. We talk a bit about what this cross-sector partnership in a cultural setting might mean and what it might become. The second one is about the project principles of cultural hubs, or in other words, about cultural living labs and how to design for those, or what things to keep in mind when doing those. The international hub collaborations is about how we in EPIC-We are collaborating across different EU countries. And there's a cultural hub in Denmark, in Aarhus, and in Portugal, in Overdose, and in the Netherlands, in Hilversum. And there's both like local hub collaborations and co-creations going on at each site, but there's also quite a lot of collaboration across hubs and beyond hubs, I think. Then there's a theme about the theoretical foundations of cultural hubs. What is it built on? And that's mostly about the Helix innovation ecosystem and living labs, which Dimitri also talked a bit about, although not about cultural hubs, but about the theories, underlying theories. A bit about cultural innovation through cultural hubs, and what the goal of the aim of the cultural hubs are in both the project and in everyday life. There's something about the everyday practicalities of cultural hub and what it means to build up a cultural hub and how it works in ordinary every like day-to-day life. And there's also something about cultural game jams, like the next theme, which is a quite big part of EPIC-We, and it's the design interventions of EPIC-We, and also where the cultural hub is essentially materialized or enacted as a living lab, but in and through these interventions. And the final 2 is about how the cultural hub connects more strongly to Helix innovation ecosystems and what that might mean. And then there's something about benefits and challenges of experiential collaborations. So I'm hoping that's enough for you to vote on. So this is not the Menti that Billy just shared, but another Menti. And I would invite you to grab your phone and scan the QR code or join Menti through the code on the right, for me at least. You could also, there's a link now in the chat, which might be better. And I think we can just have like 2 minutes, perhaps, or a minute to vote. Everyone has 5 votes, and then we'll take that direction for this talk. And if possible, I will share to the, to the other part, which is here. Are you still seeing the Mentimeter? Or are you seeing the slideshow? No. While you're voting, I'm just going to say a few words about this choose your own adventure kind of talk, because one of the key principles, at least for me, in the cultural hubs is very much about how we are constantly meeting.
Sorry, Tim. Tim, can
Yeah.
I just, if you
Sure.
don't have the QR code in front of you anymore, you can go to menti.com, or there it is. But otherwise, go to menti.com, and then use the code indicated on the top of the slide, and also here next to 63 21 98 44.
Yes, it's also in the chat if needed.
Exactly.
I'll jump back. So what I was just saying was that this is like almost a second order teaching kind of performative point, that the cultural hubs are very much about co-deciding and co-producing and co-creating and doing things collaboratively, collectively, and cooperatively. So in that sense, or in that vein, this is also what I'm like trying to showcase, that this talk also that we could co-decide on the themes or the directions of the talk. And I think I'm seeing some kind of pattern in this. So I'm gonna do cultural game jams and hub collaborations, innovation, and benefits and challenges. And we'll see if we make it all, but everyday practicalities and transversal. Fantastic. So we're back. Thank you all for voting. So I just quickly jotted it down, but we should start with theme 7, cultural game jams as materializations of living labs. So in Epic, we've like built this cultural hub as a cross-sector partnership, but it's also very much a practical model that tries to design for and enact and do something about these cultural game jams. So if you're not familiar with game jams, they are essentially, often at least, 48 hours event where participants or people meet up under a shared theme to co-create and co-design game prototype or game content under this stress of not having that much time, and also usually focused on the public dissemination of it afterwards. In Epic, we are working with cultural game jams, and this means that we are building upon game jams as a concept and as a practice, but inserting it into a cultural heritage sphere or domain. This means, for the cultural hubs at least, that we are in Denmark working with AROS, the Art Museum, in the Netherlands with the Sound and Vision Media Museum and Archive, and in Portugal, the Obidos municipality, on what each side finds are relevant and intriguing cultural problems, which could be, at least for example, for ours, how one of the exhibitions, we did it earlier this year with an exhibition called Human Nature, which is more of this so-called older golden age art. And we had a lot of youth participants from 16 to 25 working with reconfiguring, transforming, revitalizing the Aros art collection and how it might look in a game design, both regarding mechanics, game mechanics, about the game and storytelling, game worlds, and how we, in this sort of practice or innovation mode, can build something different. So the cultural hub, at least, these game jams as design interventions or events, and we've had 2 at each site this year, so 6 in total, and we're having 6 in total next year too, which are local, so across Denmark, the Netherlands, and Portugal. This is very much a physical enactment of the cultural hub. So in the Cultural Hub, as mentioned, we have the higher education partners, the creative industry partners, the cultural heritage institution partners, and the youth citizens as end users, but also more than end users, which I can come back to, participating and meeting up physically in these cultural game jams. We are, of course, also meeting before the cultural game jams, but relating it to like the Living Lab Foundation and the concept, this is very much about like meeting in real life settings, experimenting in vivo, and in those sort of things, making things work differently and innovatively across these sectors. So, as written, also, this is a sort of a rendezvous point where the sectors meet up, collaborate, co-create, and co-decide what's next for the cultural game jams and what's in it for this game design and game design event. Yes, and also the last thing, when we are arriving at the cultural game jams, there's usually more than those 4 actors part of it. There's also an emphasis on integrating external stakeholders like game companies or artists or industry or game experts or whatever might be useful in contributing to the cultural game jam experience, and also enabling the cultural hub with different expertise and different competencies that the cultural hub in itself might not have. And also discussed a bit with Rasmus that this can be like an open talk. So if there's any questions, please raise them. So on my list, the next point is the international hub collaborations. So as mentioned, we have this ecosystem across 3 countries, in Portugal, Netherlands, and Aarhus in Denmark. And for us, this is very much about both local and global collaboration. So not necessarily only local, not only global, but global somewhere in the middle. And I think almost a catchphrase of the project is that we are constantly trying to meet in the middle, or meddling in the middle of things, and figuring out what that means to be part of a middle between different stakeholders and different actors, and different routines and rhythms and ways of doing and thinking differently, actually. So a lot of the last 3 to 6 months have been about connecting across these cultural hubs. So we had our first round of local game jams, and next year it's local game jams. So from the project, it's quite vital to figure out and configure what a local game jam means, but also for the hubs to connect and find out what are like shared or diverging problems. How can we define a problem together? Which themes are relevant across these countries, and can they become relevant towards like differing or diverse youth citizens that are part of the cultural game jams, and also becoming integral and equal partners in the hubs? So in this sense, these meetings across the 3 countries and the 3 cultural hubs is always about finding out how we can equally influence and do something about the project and its emphasis on different themes, different protocols, different technologies, or as a different ways of integrating the citizen part of the project in more than an end user perspective, and focusing on how youth as the citizen dimension in every week can become this processual, influential, and also equal partner in the project. So in that sense, I think a part of the international hub collaborations is to explore what are the key differences and the similarities across hubs, and also looking from within each hub, what's the different ways of doing things across the different partners, which might not be the same for example, the creative industries across the 3 hubs, but also to find out how each sector and each hub connected to each other and also diverging from each other has different civil roles and responsibilities, and different ways of emphasizing what's in it for me, or for us, or for the project in totality, I guess. And the last thing on international hub collaborations, it's always targeted towards the larger grand project goals of empowering participation of youth citizens through culture and through gaming and within society. So in essence, the international hub collaborations on both on a practical level, but also on a more abstract level, is about how to empower youth participants in cultural game jams, and also in the process of the cultural hubs becoming and being something as a new way of collaborating across sectors. Yes. So on my next on my list is theme 5, and we'll see how far we can get into this talk. But cultural innovation through cultural hubs. So I mentioned in the beginning that the way I've begun to think of the cultural hubs and also to envision them is as a mixture of transversal and experimental partnerships. And just to put some words on what that might mean. So the transversal part I draw particularly from pure post-human thinking, and especially Rosi Braidotti, as a way of figuring out how we are constantly in these partnerships that are in the middle of something, that there's an emphasis on not having large hierarchies. There's an emphasis on meeting these codependencies and co-productive ways, and to sort of reject the binaries that we might usually think of, for example, with researcher, practitioner, designer, and then everyone becoming or working towards becoming both and always. The experimental part draws from experimental collaborations, which is a book from 2018 by Criado and Estelle, where they work with an experimental way of doing collaborative ethnography. And just to make a long story fairly short, it's about joint problematizations of the world around us. So in the similar vein as the Living Labs, it's about constantly co-defining and co-exploring what the problem might be, but it's also about co-devising possible futures and possible ways of doing things, and co-devising written with devising with a C. So it's not only about creating something, but also about creating a tangible device of sorts. And a device in this sense could be the cultural game jam model, I think. Then it's about doing something for the cultural good. So it's not only about the needs of higher education, about the needs from the creative industry or the cultural heritage institutions, for example. It's about finding a middle ground and seeing how something that we create can perhaps, or hopefully at least, become of value to a more general public, to a more general society, towards a more general problem area of participation in culture and participation in game design and gaming worlds. And then essentially empowering all partners, so in the Quadruple Helix, to become co-shapers of future cultures. This also corresponds quite a lot to the youth citizen partner in the project that initially, I think one could say that we began as a triple helix innovation ecosystem across the established sectors, and then have tried rather furiously along the last year to integrate youth citizens as more than end users and as influential partners in the project. So it's also to invite youth into the project and have them become part of reimagining and revitalizing what knowledge means and what culture means to them, and how they can become empowered and influential voices in this sort of way. I'll also say that one final thing about cultural innovation and the knowledge part is also about what from the Quadruple Helix innovation ecosystem literature is often talked about as mode-free knowledge and mode-free knowledge creation, that constantly integrating these diverse ways of knowing from different disciplines and sectors and professions, and trying to find a sort of equilibrium in between, and creating new knowledges from that. So essentially, this is about this project is working towards a sort of cultural co-creation, using game making as the vehicle or the machine to do so, and through that trying to explore and reconfigure what cultural heritage means, how it can be transformed or revitalized, but also like shifting and exploring the boundaries of what cultural heritage might mean and might become. Because there's also an emphasis on like looking across natural and cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible, and that in this quadrant of heritage, finding out what's exactly going on when youth are designing games and cultural game jams and becoming part of Global Helix innovation ecosystems, and what that does to cultural co-creation, cultural innovation, and transforming cultural heritage. Yes. The next one is, as I see it, on benefits and challenges of experiential collaborations, drawing again on the experimental part of Estella Criado. So there's both, I think, quite a large benefit in this transversal ways of knowing and becoming, that we are always looking for knowledge and creating knowledge and becoming someone together in this middle ground of sectors and partners, which for me at least resonates quite clearly with being neither home nor away, what Ortega might call a space of exile. And in this sense, it could become like a cultural space of exile. It's neither inhabited by me or the other. It's somewhere in the middle where we meet up to do something about the cultural world. It's also about, and which I think also is a benefit and a delight of the project, the continuous and joint problematizations and the co-devisings of the cultural worlds, as mentioned before with Criado and Estrella and their work, that we are on a very practical and tangible level trying to figure out and examine together what it means to design and create cultural game jams as a model and a practice, and how it might resonate with youth differently. I think one of the key things, at least from our side in the Aarhus Hub, has been how youth that are feeling foreign to games and game culture and game design, but perhaps are somewhat familiar with culture, can become more interested or find meaning in different ways in the gaming world, and vice versa. I think for other youths that are like well versed in the gaming worlds or in the game design worlds, but feeling super foreign to culture or cultural heritage, can meet across these different perspectives and find new meaning and new ways of becoming and doing things in these cultural worlds. I think one of the many challenges of the cultural hubs are that, which might be a general point in all cross-sector collaborations, is that there's a lot of differing rhythms and goals and aims and ways of knowing and ways of doing. There's different practices and a lot of different ways of meanings about what concepts are. For example, we had quite a lot of discussions in the beginning about core concepts, which is like on a tangible level, what is culture and what is a cultural game or games through and for culture, and finding it quite difficult to agree on something. I think that this like foundation is a rather built currently, like 18 months into the project, but it's still a continuous work in development, finding some balancing between all these different outsets and goals and divisions of labor and how things are done. Again, on a super practical level, the last game jam held in Aarhus, one of the key insights and key evaluations from the cultural hub there was that we had to become more mindful and perhaps also more respectful to each other's routines, and organizational and structural routines and rhythms, and how we are approaching things way differently across disciplines and sectors, and perhaps also across countries. Then I would say that the final thing for this slide, at least on benefits and challenges, is the part about empowering youth. So what we've done in the cultural hubs in EPIC is that we, at each of the 3 sites, has established youth advisory boards, which are recruited through the cultural game jams with a like diversity emphasis in mind, of someone from like the game backgrounds, from the cultural backgrounds, from the design and aesthetics backgrounds, from different cultural backgrounds and different educational backgrounds, becoming part of these youth advisory boards, which then again is becoming part of the cultural hubs as a influential and also equal voice. And this shift is both super exciting and beneficial because there's just a lot of things that, for me at least, or for us, that we're not usually aware of, or maybe we are aware of it, but don't really have a lived experience of doing it. So, for example, in the Aarhus Hub, there's an underlying and quite large goal of diversity and equity in some sense, which is something that we are, of course, aware of in the design and the practical facilitation and also in the evaluations of the cultural game jams and in our hub practices, but it's still different. And for the last 6 months or so, we've had a youth advisory board member also become part of initially of Film Aarhus and the creative industry partner in Aarhus, and now becoming part of Aarhus University and the higher education partner, and is essentially like traveling around the global helix, which brings a lot of new knowledge and a lot of new perspectives to something that can be improved and iterated in these cultural hub living labs situations and contexts and designs. It's also rather difficult at times because I think it's fairly rare that the large-scale EU projects like EU Horizon projects integrate youth citizens or youth voices as formal parts of the projects from the beginning. So in this sense, the youth advisory boards and the part in the cultural hubs are something that's become an add-on of sorts at the project, but inside the project it has a profound voice and a lot of influence. So it's like a structural challenge of sorts to do it correctly and also nicely, I think. And then also perhaps depending on the youth advisory board, but it's another actor to coordinate with, to work with, and also having them emphasize their voices and their perspectives, and it adds another layer of complexity to the collaboration and co-creation models, I think. But essentially wildly meaningful and delightfully challenging. So I think for me it's number 6, everyday practicalities. And I'm just trying to keep, is it the last slide, Rasmus?
I hope so.
Yes, okay, fair enough. So just a quick wrap up of this, and then I'll continue into the real wrap up, I think. But the cultural hub is a model that is a work in progress. So we are always and continuously working with what a cultural hub is and what it might become and how it might influence like a living lab, a collaborative structure, and how it might become something differently across sectors and across nations. But I think from a very practical point of view, it's defined by having a hub leader or essentially a coordinator of sorts. It's defined by having formal and scheduled meetings in the intervention spaces, by working in dualities between slowness and design sprints, and something that are materialized through game jams or cultural game jams, essentially. And just to be mindful of time, I'll go back and then jump into this. So just wrapping up, I think, and I hope it made semi-sense, is that the cultural hubs are a form of cultural living labs framed within like a theoretical framework of Rob Helix innovation ecosystem and partnerships, but it's also about these permeative, fuzzy, blurry boundaries between sectors. For me, at least, it's best understood as transversal and experimental collaborations for public good, and there's also a focus and an emphasis on collaborative care and nurturing the relationships between sectors and between disciplines all the time in this transdisciplinary context. The cultural hubs explore, examine, experiment, intervene, and iterate with tangible designs and interventions, cultural game jams, and which are like a vehicle towards cultural innovations. And lastly, I think it's also worth to mention that that the culture hubs is sort of working in between, or seeking to work in between like traditional binaries and normativity of local, global, local, or natural cultural heritage, or perhaps also the disciplinary, sectoral, or chrono-normative categories like Boring Freeman. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Kim. And now we have about 24 minutes for questions. Before you head out, any of you, please reply to the second Mentimeter we have. You can see the link here in the chat, and it is a more general about this, your reflections and takeaways from this Mentimeter, from this session today. You can click on the link in this Mentimeter. Let's start out with Dimitri. If any of you have questions for Dimitri Schuurman, you can either write them in the chat, or you can simply unmute and then go ahead and ask. Or maybe it was simply so clear. Let me just see if I have missed any existing questions that someone put in.
Hello, I've got a question for Dimitri, if that's okay.
Go for it, Paul.
Hi, I'm just wondering, within the Living Lab space, if you saw like a change in focus during COVID and what that was.
Yeah, very good question. I think the major, of course, then the real life testing and experimenting became way harder. And also, I think still to co-create, it's optimal when you are face to face, but that it's really required to become creative. Also, if you looked well at some of the pictures and the movies, you saw people with mouth masks. So in a way, we did continue during COVID, because one of the example stuff was during COVID. I think the main thing there is that what we discovered is to really make a more thorough assessment which are activities that really require real life participation and on-site, and which stuff that you can do online. In a way, you can do most of it online, but it's more efficient to do it offline. So what did change, I think, is that more tools and also online tools were being adopted because they had to. So stuff changed, Miro, stuff like that, like Mentimeter, like this. It became more, let's say, familiar to do so. But in the end, we also discovered the best thing is still to really do it effectively on site, face to face, without any restrictions. I think these were the learnings.
Thank you. I also have a similar question for Kim, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri. Kim, I'm just wondering again, because the current youth, or as I see youth at the moment, will have been impacted by COVID quite a lot, and ideas of getting together and designing and creating something. I'm just wondering if you've I guess had any. I'm trying to phrase my question here. I'm wondering what the response has been from the youth in kind of getting together again and designing after a period of kind of being locked away for a while. If there's a noticeable impact of that at all in these cultural hubs.
I'm trying to think it over. I think I'm also the sort of facilitator of the youth advisory board in Denmark, or in Aarhus. And I don't really recall that that's been a topic of discussion in the youth advisory board. I think they've all been impacted by it in some way during their personal time or study time, but it's not been part of discussions we had in the youth advisory boards. I think on the opposite, there's been quite a lot of a hunger towards meeting up and doing things in person and in practical ways, and not only living this online life and online meeting life. So I'm not really sure if COVID has had an influence on this project. It began in late spring 2023 or mid spring 2023. So in the Danish side of things, a year or two after the final lockdowns. Perhaps others would say something different. But I don't think that COVID has impacted this project or the youth and their participation in a strong way.
Thank you, Kim. We have a question from Rikke, and you're welcome to unmute, Rikke, if you want to ask it directly either to Dimitri or to Kim.
Yeah, you will have to excuse my sick voice then. Sorry. So yeah, I think it was a question to Dimitri, and thank you for two really excellent presentations. But Dimitri, now you had the chance to listen to the presentation on culture hubs after doing your presentation on living labs, and I was just wondering if you, when listening, noticed and wondered any interesting synergies or problematic diversities when you compare, because as you might know, the Living Lab is a huge inspiration for the cultural hubs combined with the quadruple helix that you also mentioned. So are there also any obvious sweet spots where using your experience, we could really kind of take advantage of what we are doing or even boost the potential?
Yeah, I think especially in terms of also the methods and the tools, I think a lot of inspiration can be drawn on what you are doing. I think there's a lot of creativity, a lot of ideas ongoing, which can be also applied in other living labs. And I think from my side or from our side, a bit more the higher layers. How can it also become more permanent? How can it become more permanent organizations that also potentially deliver solutions that also can be scaled up? So I think it's a bit on both sides that some inspiration and some ideas can be gathered. I think we can contribute to let's say the more or how can you see these cultural hubs potentially or scale them to become more sustainable living lab organizations, whereas you also have these very creative approaches, I think, and that it might be worthwhile to see, hey, are there maybe any of these approaches we can also use in different contexts for learning and for exchange, and therefore also maybe the link with the working group of the European Network of Living Labs on Culture and Creativity might be interesting to explore if there are any synergies with also living labs who are working in those domains.
Thank you so much. And just again, taking the opportunity to do the reverse. And so Kim, listening to Dimitri's presentation on living labs, was something you particularly noticed or wondered that you think should be boosted inside the cultural hubs, or perhaps because it's cultural hubs and not other domains, something we should perhaps be mindful of not overemphasizing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So perhaps it's almost the same answer, but from a different perspective. So I think that from Epic, we have this quite substantial toolkit or design toolkit for doing cultural game jams, but we don't really have like this tangible toolkit or methods toolkit for the quadruple helix or cultural living labs and how to approach them or co-design something through those. So materializing something very practical for the co-creative endeavors of the cultural hub would be, I think, highly meaningful and also as a super helpful in reality. And that might be also what Dimitri mentioned. And then again, it's yeah, I think there's a lot of things to reflect on, dwell on how we approach the cultural hub. So we've also like built upon quadruple helix and living labs and those concepts from the beginning, right? So, but there's still something about the like becoming more clear on how the like what the in situ or in vivo environment really is in our case, and what and how we are approaching that from a living lab perspective. And I think that sounds like an awesome idea to highlight or accentuate the more like creative, experimental, playful part of this project, because that might be something different from other ways of doing it, other ways of approaching living labs. That at least quite a few of us are coming from these play-based, playful, creative-based pedagogies and are used to in that some like context to design playful scenarios or playful toolkits of different sorts. That could also be quite interesting, I think.
Great. Anyone else with questions for our excellent speakers? What do you say, Berit? Did you observe anything? Anyone?
Yes, I have put some answers from the Mentimeter in the chat. Maybe Dimitri or Kim could share their reflections on these
These are
challenges.
what you say, some challenges are identified as. So if you see them in the chat, it's minding different work cultures, integration the fourth helix, working with different ways of knowing towards co-creating new technologies, interventions, design, etc. Differing rhythms, routines, division of labor, and implementing all parts of the helix. So, of course, I think we covered some of this, but if either Dimitri or Kim would like to, is this surprising to you? If not, hey.
Not really, I think. But I think it's also especially the implementing all parts of the helix or the system is and the different helices is like the paramount part of this work and trying to do it in non-competitive equal ways. Even though it's always it's intentional, it's challenging. To work across these different work and disciplinary and professional boundaries and finding out what that means to each partner and how each partner responds to those different rhythms or ways of knowing or ways of doing.
Well, and maybe I can also add to that. Indeed, I also think this collaboration across the different helices and across different disciplines, it's indeed the big challenge. And that's also why I also, in our research agenda, we think that design can play an important role in there by having design producing tangible outcomes and making sense of them together. It's sometimes possible to also transcend beyond the jargon or beyond the terminology or language of the different actors. So these kind of creative methods and tools, I think there's still a huge opportunity to come up with approaches that really are able to transcend this, so that you can really, for sure, co-create between these different types and profiles. So I would also see within this project that could be one of the main focuses, and to think about how can you really transcend beyond that to really come up with these creative approaches. And that's also why the NL now is also looking for these artists. We're looking for people from the sector of the arts to see how can we transcend and go beyond these boundaries.
Excellent. Then what I will say is in 6 days, 22 hours, 40 minutes, and 4 seconds, our next webinar will take place. That's on the 9th, Monday, the 9th of December at 2 o'clock as usual. And it's about cultural game jams. It's the 3rd webinar, but it's the 4th session that we're doing. And you can go to the Games for Culture community in My Creative Networks and save your seat. If there are no other questions or anything coming in here, then I would like to say thanks to all of you for participating, and especially to, here we have the overview of what's happening next Monday, but I would like to say thank you to Dimitri and Kim for this excellent afternoon in your company and your knowledge. Berit, anything I forgot?
No, thank you, everyone. I've already put the links to the next session and all sessions in the chat, so don't forget to register. And also, I will be uploading the recording and the materials to our media center, and you can check it out from the media center of the Games for Culture group, as well as all the recordings from the first 2 sessions are there. And thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
and
you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.